We have an opportunity to talk with Cody Roark, our lead Broncos writer and the host of the Locked On Broncos podcast, as well as the film room there on YouTube. Cody, thanks for joining us. But now that the Broncos back, not that the Broncos ever leave the spotlight, but the Nuggets are done, the Avalanche are done, the Rockies were done about a week into the season, if that long. So now we're obviously back at the Broncos. And you and I were chatting this morning a little bit about, at this point, what to look at. Now the OTAs will be at the end of the month. Some of those off-season workouts, a little at the end of the
next week.
Yep, and then we're talking about a little bit in June, and then mandatory minicamp. But one of the questions surrounding this team is how much they did to shore up the offense. We assumed there was going to be a high pick on a tight end, even with Evan Engram being added. That didn't happen. They did add a wide receiver in Pat Bryant, but maybe expected to be in the mix with a lot of other guys. But we knew they needed a running game. This team's running game last year was awful. You can look at some of the metrics on the offensive line. They were really not taking advantage of the opportunities given to them. Javonte Williams now moves on to Dallas, where, cross your fingers, wish the best for Javonte. He can bounce back and get healthy and regain the momentum that he had early in his career. But that leaves the Broncos with a room of who knows. You have Jaleel McLaughlin, who's an undersized change of pace guy. I mean, he's slightly bigger than me. And if you remember the people that met me in person, you realize, wow, that guy probably doesn't belong on an NFL football field. Fortunately, Jaleel's much stronger and much faster, but he's not the guy that you're going to be running up through the tackles all the time. So they pick RJ Harvey in the second round, and they bring back Audric Estime. These are guys that were immensely productive in their last two seasons in college. Harvey, UCF, and Estime at Notre Dame. Obviously, you kind of forget about that after Estime's had a year in the pros. But Estime was benched at the Buffalo game. We understand that. You've indicated, though, that doesn't really have any impact on this season, where Estime is expected to be a big part of the offense, if not even running back number 1 or 1A.
Yeah, going back to Audric, it wasn't necessarily benched to be benched. He was just, from a matchup standpoint, the Broncos, there was a loyalty to Javonte Williams. And look, obviously the Broncos making it to the playoffs for, the first time in 10 years. Javonte, everything that he's gone through. Sean was very loyal to Javonte and liked Javonte, even though he wasn't as an effective runner as we saw him, obviously, in his rookie season. And that was tough. Sean, unfortunately, I think Sean should have went away from that, but he didn't. So Audric, got the inactive for that game in favor of Tyler Bidet, who the Broncos felt like he had this explosive element to him that they felt like they could take advantage of. They didn't really do that. There was no utilization of that really in that game. I think he had 2 carries for 8 yards, and I think he had 1 carry in total of the 2 that he had for 8 yards there. But, for the Broncos right now, the idea is not to have a bell cow running back approach. Ideally for Sean, he doesn't believe in the bell cow. He is going to spread this out from a volume standpoint amongst at least 2 running backs. And then a third guy, a change of pace guy, will probably have to come in and maybe be in situationally, or, maybe it's contingent upon a certain matchup or down in distance, certain side of the field, whatever it may be. But the idea right now is that Audric Estime and RJ Harvey, at least on paper, and RJ Harvey's obviously going to have to come in, and it's not just going to be handed to him, pun intended, but he's going to have to come in and obviously work for it. And I think the one thing that plays into the dynamic of this running back room is that really right now, I think Audric will probably get first opportunity, in terms of just having that stature of being in the system already. But RJ Harvey is picking up the playbook pretty quickly. He's really taken a knack to it. He's got this mindset where he wants to be as prepared as he can be. But I also think there's an adjustment period. There's a learning curve here for, a guy like RJ Harvey, who, yes, he was terrific at UCF, but you got to figure out what you can and can't do at the NFL level as a runner versus what he was able to do at the college level. So I think that'll come in the preseason for him. And I think early on in the regular season. But I think if people are coming into the season right now saying, okay, week 1 against Tennessee, RJ Harvey needs to show that he's the guy right away. I don't think that's the case. I think that's a very unrealistic and unfair expectation to place on a guy, especially when you're placing the defensive line. It's got Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat and former Bronco Draymond Jones. They've loaded up on the defensive side in Tennessee a little bit there. Granted, even though they were the number 1 overall pick in the draft this past year, can't overlook Tennessee week 1 against the Broncos. We know the schedule release is out there. But let RJ Harvey get to that point. I think Audric Estime will probably be the first guy in line for carries.
One of the criticisms last year, and it depends on talent, but it also happens when you're having running backs by committee. And Sean Payton's done that his whole career. You're 100% right. There's no indication he's going to really have a bell cow guy. He's never done that. He didn't do it with the Saints. There's no reason to do it with the Broncos. But that there's been an argument that, especially when you're talking about more than two backs, right? We've certainly seen across the league when it's two backs, you can make that work. Look at what's happened to Detroit. Look at a lot of the teams that run those two back sets. But when it's more than two, it becomes a little hard to get guys into the rhythm of the game, work up the lather, as they like to say in football, and get themselves really ready for that. That appeared at times, Cody, to look like some of the challenges in the Broncos running game. Did you see that as the same thing, or was this just a factor of the running back room wasn't good enough? And if it's the latter, is just swapping out Javonte Williams for RJ Harvey enough? Because that's all they've done.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily that. I think that there was a vision problem at times with the run game. I think Javonte probably struggled with vision the most. I think people kind of knew there was a little bit of a tendency where Jaleel would run when he came in. A lot of it was, can we get Jaleel to the outside where he can maybe get an edge on guys? Can we get him to the C gap? Can we get him, in certain instances, can we run trap and can he get skinny and get 4 or 5 yards? He did that from time to time. But there were just times where the Broncos, in their offensive line, George Payton, Sean Payton told us at the end of the year presser, they told us that they have the offensive line. It was their highest graded unit on their entire roster, defensive line second. And they really feel like they have a scheme in place that will be effective. So you obviously have to go and upgrade the personnel. I think the one thing that you look at with RJ Harvey that the Broncos simply did not have last year. And I think Audric Estime actually had this. I thought he did a really good job in the limited sample size that we saw from him. I think vision is obviously one of the more important traits here with the running back position. Yeah, you got the physical tools that Audric has, but now you have the physical tools, the athletic tools that a guy like RJ Harvey has. But the one thing that he has that I feel like is his strength is his vision as a ball carrier, his ability to change pace, quick cuts, plant his foot in the ground, getting north-south. The one thing we always hate to say, when we coach up our running backs is we hate east-west, right? East-west is a negative storm waiting to happen. Whatever you can, like if your first initial step, you have to bounce it. Okay, bounce it, put that foot in dirt and get north-south very quickly. RJ's got that. Audric's got that to his game there. I think Audric's more of that power style runner where I think a guy like, RJ Harvey, he's got some power to him. You can absolutely see that on film, but I think that speed and that vision and that quickness combined with that, that's where his ultimate strength is going to come into play here. I think with these two guys, the Broncos believe they have the formula. But my question here, Sean, you mentioned with the three backs that the Broncos kind of rolled with last year, the rotation and who was featured was widely inconsistent. And sometimes Sean Payton stuck with the wrong guy too long, and that was Javonte, unfortunately. As much as I love Javonte, great human being, always been great to me. But from a player and a business standpoint, he just didn't get the job done as a runner. I mean, there was a stretch of games. I think it was 4 straight games where I think he had 4 games, and I think he had like minus yards. I think he had like minus 13 yards in totality through a 4-game stretch. So that was a little problematic here. Sean and the Broncos are going to have to come out, and they're going to have to identify what that running back rotation is going to look like. And you can't change it up every week the way that they did last week. And I understand you're going to face different fronts defensively that might change how you want to approach it, but you got to find a way to use your base personnel to be able to do that versus, all right, we believe that this speed is going to work this week, so we're going to play Tyler Bidet this amount of snaps more than this guy. You have to have continuity in that running back rotation. And I'm curious to see if that's going to be a heavy emphasis this offseason.
Yeah, that's a good point too, especially when you're talking about, certain guys basically not touching the ball at all one week and then the week before being involved. That's tricky. And I also just think when you get more than 2 in there, it's complicated.
Yes.
And especially when you look at Jaleel McLaughlin's case, as the year went along, a lot of what Jaleel McLaughlin did 2 years ago and then last year started to get duplicated by Marvin Mims, who the Broncos started putting in the backfield. It felt to me as a lot of what Jaleel McLaughlin did, the Broncos were starting to move that responsibility over to Mims, who they feel is even more explosive and can do more things with the football. So I get that as a bit of a decoy. But if you want to really go with 2 guys for the most part and mix in a change of pace, that means that either Harvey or Estime has to become a guy that can receive out of the backfield. And neither of those guys did that all that often in their college careers. Estime didn't catch very often. He only had 5 catches with the Broncos in his rookie year. He wasn't a big pass catcher at Notre Dame. Harvey caught more passes.
He hurled the dude, but it got called back due to Garrett Bowles,
right.
Trying to protect his quarterback a little bit. I mean, I like that, but
neither of these guys have, at least if you're going to take Sean Payton at his word, right? Where he says confidence is proven ability, right?
Yeah.
So neither RJ Harvey nor Audric Estime has proven that they can be regular receiving threats, and especially neither's proven them at the NFL level.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason why they probably have Evan Engram on the roster right now, is that kind of move around piece. Because really the idea of the running back in the passing game, I mean, at times you want to be able to attack the flat, but primarily this is to isolate in the middle of the field, attack that middle of the field where you get a matchup against the linebacker. And that's where Marvin Mims benefited last year in the backfield, because you'd get a defense in a man coverage look. You have Marvin in the backfield, and that means, he's matched up with an inside linebacker, because you're not going to have a safety play man on the running back unless you're blitzing one guy on the opposite side at linebacker and the other guy's going to replace in coverage and the safety's dropping down. Then maybe you get it in that situation. But primarily it's, hey, can we isolate and attack the middle of the field when we get these 2 high safety looks that are now the common theme in the NFL? That's the emphasis here for Sean. And look, even though that RJ Harvey doesn't have that established, I can't tell you exactly what happened, Sean, because I'm not allowed to report on that stuff. But I like the plan so far, what Sean has done to get RJ involved in the passing game with working certain concepts with them. I think we're going to see some really exciting things this upcoming season in terms of being able to see RJ as a receiver and what that may entail. But you have to find a way to establish that as a threat in your game. But I think the safety blanket for that, as those guys kind of get brought up to speed or implemented in that role, is Evan Engram, obviously, as that move around piece where they are going to attack the middle of the field a lot. I think personally, Sean, they need to use Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims more in the middle of the field versus just, hey, let's send them on the nine route. Use Troy Franklin on crossers across the middle of the field. I guarantee you some things will pay off, obviously, with his connection with Bo Nix if you do that. But if you're just running them on 9 routes the entire game, it's not going to really be as effective to open things up for the rest of your offense. So I think that's where Pat Bryant's also going to come into the mix a little bit. How the Broncos decide to attack the middle of the field is going to open up a lot of different things, I think, in the passing game for the running back position and for tight end.
That's a good point, especially about Franklin, because if you actually look at his career in Oregon with Bo Nix as his quarterback, they did most of their work in the middle of the field. Even though Franklin's a 6'4" guy, most of his work was in the middle of the field, and the Broncos didn't really use a lot of that. And obviously, if Franklin were to take a big leap forward, we know that his separation was elite. Even at the NFL level as a rookie, he could make a jump. But looking at these 2 backs, they're shorter, more powerful guys, big, thick guys. Could the Broncos be leaning into power football? That doesn't seem to be something that Payton tried to do last year, but maybe now with some consistent options, maybe they do have the ability to lean into some power football, which might be able to get them into more convertible third downs and make life a lot easier for Bo Nix and company.
Yeah, no, I think that they should embrace a little bit more of that power style. And I would love to see them pull the guards a little bit more, pull Ben Powers, pull Quinn Miners. Heck, you could even, block down with your center, pull your guard and your tackle to get to the outside space. Like, I want to see a little bit more of that creativity here with the offensive line. And obviously now you have, the way the Broncos have kind of changed and restructured their coaching staff a little bit. Zach Strief is obviously the O-line coach, but he's the Broncos run game coordinator offensively. And then you have an assistant offensive line coach as well, who's got, his own responsibility. So how do you take that next step from your overall scheme, which, the Broncos graded very high last season, but how do you get it to carry over? If you make these improvements here where you think that, guys like Audric Estime and RJ Harvey are going to have improved vision. Okay, well, if the Broncos run game is suddenly effective and it's one of the more important elements there, okay, how does it open everything up for the offense? To really be on that, like, we have to see the games be played first. But looking back at last season, Sean, how Denver had a chance to obviously take a massive jump on the offensive side last year without a consistent run game, mind-boggling to me when you look at how the season went and some of the opponents that they faced, because I think you can make the argument, if Denver has a better running offense last season, they may very well win 13, 14 games last year. The biggest issue for them was finding ways to win some of those one-score possessions. When you look at their 10 wins that they had last year, 9 of their 10 wins were by 9 or more points last season. So when they're winning, they were winning pretty comfortably in a lot of those situations. The closer games was ones where they struggled a little bit. And I think having an established run game helps. And then what do? You go out there and you add, strengths to your defense with Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga. That's going to make you better at stopping the run and being able to cover the middle of the field in the passing game a little bit more effectively than they did last year. On paper, the Broncos, I feel like, have done everything they can to make this the year where they really take another leap forward.
Bo Nix had almost 100 carries last year. 92 carries was actually, it's not even arguably. He was the Denver Broncos' most effective runner, even though he didn't have the most yards. He was tied to the team leading touchdowns, as you can see there. And that added a lot of diversity to a Broncos offense that did not have very much. I mean, the vast majority of this year, you've talked about it. It was Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton, and that was kind of what you could count on. Nix could run, and we know that there are modern two-way quarterbacks. At the same time, Nix broke vertebra in his back, transverse fractures at the tail end of the year. Is Sean Payton, who's never been really a mobile quarterback guy, is Sean Payton really ready to have Bo Nix take all those risks by leaning into his running and saying, Bo Nix's running game is part of what we're going to bring to the offense every week, knowing that you put him at extraordinary risk, and even in his rookie year, you already got it. We're talking about broken bones in your back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he suffered the broken bones, not from running the ball, but from obviously getting twirled and spun wrong on his back by Tyree Wilson. Or else I think he would have had more rushing yards and there would have been a little bit more emphasis on him running. But with Sean, like the thing with Bo and design runs, it seems to be very methodical. At least in the times that we saw it, there were times where he was escaping pressure. We go back to that first Los Angeles Chargers game at home where he's dropping back, Khalil Mack's coming around, almost wraps up around him, and he dips and ducks and is able to evade. There's one against Tampa Bay where he evades backside pressure and then runs for a first down. I mean, so much of that was also him escaping pressure and getting away from sacks, protecting the football. But the design runs, I felt like we really saw that emphasis in the New Orleans Saints game on Thursday Night Football, where Sean, there was a concerted effort to use him a certain way, whereas I felt like obviously Sean used Bo Nix at times last year the way that he used to use Taysom Hill, which I like, but you can't have that be your entire offense, right? Especially with your quarterback. You want to be able to make sure he doesn't take as much hit and as much contact as other guys have. I mean, we have the same conversations about Lamar Jackson in Baltimore as, all right, you don't want him taking all these shots, but man, he's a dynamic runner when you got the opportunity to do that. Bo is dynamic. He's not Lamar Jackson fast, but he is dynamic on the ground. You have to just be methodical. It has to be kind of opened up, right? And I go back even when Russell Wilson was on the roster here for Denver. It was against the Cleveland Browns. It's really where we started to see Sean Payton start to do more QB design runs because you didn't see it as much. And like, wait a minute, where did this come from? Well, they had it in their back pocket. I think it's going to be a part of it, but I think that Sean is going to do whatever he can to protect Bo and not put him in those situations. But I do think by design, you're going to see some runs created there. And obviously, you're going to have the off-structure runs where he's going to escape pressure. But yeah, you can't have Bo Nix taking all these shots. And I think that's why you really have a running back by committee approach.
Yeah, keep in mind, by the way, it's not an apples to apples, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's not saying that it won't. Sam Ellinger was added in the offseason, kind of a Taysom Hill light sort of guy.
Please, no.
I think they're going to see if some of that bubbles up. I think that's why they brought him on, to see if some of that might be transferable, but we'll find out more about it.
He'll be a practice squad quarterback this year for Denver. I think really for Denver, they want to just have another guy in the building for training camp and preseason. Jarrett Stidham, you're going to see him play a lot in the preseason, and Ellinger. You're going to see Bo here and there, but primarily since Bo is the guy, I don't think you're going to see him as much as maybe we saw last year in the preseason. But there's a lot of time between now and then. We'll see.
Last one for you then, because obviously, a lot of this looks good on paper at the same time. We're talking about in Estime and Harvey, in theory, are the top two running backs is the way we put it here. And we've talked about this whole conversation. They have a grand total of 310 yards and 2 touchdowns at the NFL level. Grand total between the two of them, because Harvey's a rookie. The assumption that all of this is going to work, right? What if it doesn't? What if we get into training camp and this isn't popping the way you wanted it to? What can the Broncos do? How quickly would they move? Because you can't necessarily assume that all of the young guys are going to absolutely explode just the way you plan on it. Sports never works that way.
No, it never does. And if it doesn't work, to me, there's a major injury on the offensive line, interior, outside. I think that's going to be a factor into it. I think that Denver's got enough good pieces around for these guys to thrive. But I think an injury could derail this from happening, to either of these guys, which certainly you don't want to see. And if that's the case, the guys that you have on the roster, really outside of Jaleel McLaughlin, are unproven. They don't have a large sample size. They're relative unknowns. Could the Broncos look at the veteran market and bring in a guy? I know J.K. Dobbins is still available. I know Nick Chubb is still available. I imagine those guys will be available for quite a bit sometime, unless there's an injury that pops up during training camp for some team out there. It's just hard, but the Broncos, they're banking on the fact that it will work. But I also know, and I can't tell you what this is, but I also know that if it doesn't work, they've got a plan in place, and they're asking, I think, Broncos country to participate in a trust fall exercise with them. You have to have, I think, more options, because you can't put all your eggs in one basket. We saw how that worked out with Greg Dulcich. Sean Payton comes in his first year and is like, wow, this Greg Dulcich guy looks like he could be the joker, that I've had in my other teams. You put all the eggs in that basket, he gets hurt, and all of a sudden that joker role disappears from your offense, and then didn't work out. So you have to have contingency plans. I think that Denver's roster is in a good space right now to where they have that, but we're going to have to wait and see. And Sean, we're going to get our first look next week at obviously the veterans and the rookies kind of coming together. Now, obviously it's not mandatory next week. It's still during the voluntary portion of OTAs. We'll see if we get access to all 3 days or whether we get access to 1 day, but a lot of stuff right now. So for the next 3 weeks, there's going to be practice. Next week is obviously the first stretch of OTAs where they're on the field. 2 weeks from now, that second stretch. And then that third week, June 10th through 12th, is mandatory minicamp, where we will get access to all 3 days. So there's going to be a ton of content coming up here on Mile High Sports, on social media, written, video, whatever you may have, social media. I mean, it's going to be a busy next 3 weeks. And then 4 weeks, I'm getting married. So you're going to have to deal with me taking a little bit of an absence there. So it'll be one of those things.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot cooking here, and it will be interesting to see what the Broncos do. And you're right. You talk about the trust and all that. Of course, that's really what teams ask of their fans every single year. But we are also waiting for the first 100-yard rusher in Sean Payton's tenure.
30-plus games. My goodness.
Yep, as a Denver Broncos coach.
You know who the last 100-yard rusher was? A little pop trivia for you.
Oh, man. Go for it.
Latavius Murray. Back
there you go.
Mossberg was the interim head coach.
Yep. So, I mean, it's been a while, and obviously you want to have that threat. And so Harvey and Estime especially have a lot to do with how this Broncos offense will go. Until you can generate some sort of running game, you do run the chance of being in neutral. So we'll find out what they do. And, of course, check out all of the film rooms that Cody's put together. You can catch up on a lot of these guys, primers on what to look for as the upcoming the OTAs and mini camps are coming along. So make sure you check all that out as well. So, Cody, thanks for the time. Enjoy talking to you about this. This is the running game to me is first and foremost, and then we'll find out a little bit more about the tight ends and keep your fingers crossed for a healthy.
Yeah, and shout out to my man Ryan Blackburn. He's going to have a tough offseason ahead of him trying to figure out this Nuggets mess, but Ryan's got you covered every step of the way too, folks. I'm excited to see how it goes. Me, I'm an angry Nuggets fan, so Ryan helps me get through things a little bit. So yeah, a lot of good stuff here in the Denver sports scene.
It is. We're looking forward to it, and obviously the Broncos back in the playoffs last year. Hope that's kind of the floor again. The expectation is they'll have to get back in some capacity. If they don't, then we'll have questions to ask for that as well. Cody, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Always good to talk to Cody here about the Broncos. Make sure you give him a follow. Check out everything he puts together at Mile High Sports, and check out all those film rooms while you're at it too. Really, really good stuff after the season ended. All those are still, of course, fresh because, we're going to have that next season for a while. So make sure you give that a peek as well.